There we go. We're on. Life is starting to be okay. All right, we'll crank this up just a little bit. Now we'll crank it back down. And let me do the introductions here. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon around the world. This is Martin Hubel, your host of the DB2Night show. Today is a Z show, and we're pleased to have a new speaker with us this week, Katherine Soohoo of the IBM SVL. How are you doing today, Katherine?
Oh, doing great.
Fantastic. Me too. We had our first snow this week. A little early, actually, in its own way, but we're getting by. So let me get the formalities out of the way, and then we can carry on and hear your great presentation on the new development experience on DB2 on Z. As always, please watch Twitter, the DB2Night show, hashtag of DB2Night. Hopefully that will continue to work as Elon Musk reinvents Twitter. It's going to be great. I can feel it. But having said that, we'll hopefully be able to do that. The other way we advertise the show is through the iDoug list server. We like to put things on there, and that's another good way to follow us as well. Replays are on YouTube. That continues to, it's increasing in popularity because it's a real easy way to get the show without having to download things. Also, as always, Katherine, if you could supply a PDF of your slides, people always enjoy having that for reference, and I'll speak with you after the show about that. Carrying on, there's our disclaimers and our copyright information, we respect copyrights, and we're recording the show, and that'll be made available later. The rest of it you can read at your leisure. I used to try to read that. I did a pretty good job for years, but the last 3 or 4 years, I just can't bring myself to do it anymore. So here's our shows upcoming. We have the next month, we have a talk from Kerry Romanoff, the chief architect of DB2LUW. Will be talking about DB2 11.5.8. We're still in point releases, but I believe that might be the last point release before they change some of the other numbers. And of course, we have today's presentation, and next month we have a user presentation from Brian Lauby of Manulife. He'll be talking about DB2 temporary tables, declared versus created, amongst other things in that topic. I think you can pretty well call that a cross-platform topic, and it's always interesting to hear what people say on that. And I know Manulife is a heavy DB2 user, so I'm personally looking forward to that topic, and I'm sure you will be too. As always, the primary sponsor of the DB2Night show is DBI Software. They supply performance tools for DB2LUW, and they, as always, have a way of allowing you to look at their products and the demo available online. Look at that. And they recently brought out a new version, which also has some other great features. Our winner of the Amazon gift certificate for our last show was Chuck Cozen of AAA California. I think Chuck is a repeat winner, but he's always on the show, so it's only a matter of time till he wins again. So congratulations, Chuck, and there we go. Our sponsors, as always, are DBI and yours truly, Martin Hubel Consulting, and we're happy to be here. Now, I always like to put in a joke cartoon or something to show what's going on in the Toronto area where I live. And today we got not a cartoon, but kind of one of those pictures that makes you go, "Aw!" And there he is, a baby fox playing in the snow. Let's assume for the very first time. So that's kind of what happened to us this week. I was actually playing a musical last night, and on the way home I had some winter driving conditions, and so I slowed down. I got down to about 80 kilometers an hour on the freeway, and that's about 50 miles an hour. Other people were still going about 75 because that's what they like to do, but I didn't think it was a very good idea. And with that, Katherine, we're back to you as presenter. We'll make you presenter now. And if you click that button again, we should see your screen momentarily. And there we go, we do. So, and you're in presentation mode and ready to go. As always with the DB2Night show, I'll mute myself so you don't have to listen to any background noise. Oh, before we did that, I forgot one thing. Forgot the polling questions. We can do that even while you're the presenter. So let me do that now.
Sure.
Just ask people what the DB2 ZOS version they're currently running. Get people to vote on that. And they get to choose all that apply so they can have multiple answers coming in. And we'll give it another couple of seconds here. And there, we'll close that off and share the results. So people are getting new. We have some old stuff hanging around, and that can happen. But on the whole, the audience is up on 508 or higher, and that's great to see. Let me hide that, and I'll share the next question. We don't have a lot of questions here. I just put one in regarding and we're getting some answers quickly on this, so it won't take long before I close that off and share. And we'll do that now. And there's the results. And hopefully we'll turn some of those no's into a yes after the people hear your presentation. So that's information there. So with that in mind, we're back to you. Take it away. I'll be watching the question tool. And as questions come through, I'll hopefully interrupt you at a convenient point and we'll get the questions taken care of as we go along, just to keep things interactive. All right, all yours.
All right, great. Thanks, Martin. So hello, everyone. I'm Katherine Soohoo. I'm the technical lead developer for the DB2 developer extension, which is that second question you guys just answered. So today I'll be talking about how the extension itself has been transforming the
Katherine, your sound seemed to go away there. I don't know. It sounds like all of a sudden you went mute or something. I see that you're not muted, so I'm just wondering what's happening there. Still can't hear you. Sound is off. Well, I guess that's, wonder why that is. That's
hello, can you guys hear me?
Can hear you now. I don't know what happened there.
Okay.
And you're actually, yeah,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, you were speaking, and all of a sudden it seems to fade to nothing very quickly.
Yeah, I'm using a Bluetooth earpiece, so I think it suddenly disconnected.
Don't you hate that? All right.
All right, I'll use my laptop microphone, if that sounds okay with you guys.
Sounds just great.
All right.
I love Bluetooth, except when it doesn't work.
Yes. All right, so I'll start from the beginning again, since I'm not sure where I cut off. Hello, everyone. Again, I'm Katherine Soohoo. I'm the technical lead developer for the DB2 developer extension. So today I'll be talking about how the extension itself has been transforming the DB2 application development scene. And since most of you, based on the poll, seem to have not heard about the extension, hopefully this would be a great introduction to that. So going over the agenda, just a few things to go over. First, I'll give a quick overview about what the current issue is and how the extension solves these problems. as well as how easy it is to install the extension from VS Code. And then once we get through that, then I'll go over some of the high-level features and also include a demo for those features. And lastly, I'll share with you guys the roadmap we have for any of the upcoming features in the next coming years and months. All right, so the overview. So first, I'd like to introduce our persona, Deb, who is a new ZOS developer. So Deb is interested in writing DB2 applications. So this could be coding, debugging, or tuning applications written in Java or other languages with embedded SQL in it to access DB2. And she may also be interested in tuning those SQL statements and also running them outside of the actual application. And in addition, she may also be interested in working with stored procedures, and that includes debugging them, deploying them, and also running them. So some of the pain points that Deb will have as a new ZOS developer is she'll require very specific Z domain skills to get started. And that may be a kind of a learning curve for her in the very beginning. And also because there's various languages you have to deal with. There's SQL, there's dealing with native stored procedure syntax, and also the external languages like Java, COBOL, or PL1. You may need to interact with different tools in order to work on those different languages. So as a result, she may have reduced productivity because of these blockers. So that's where the DB2 developer extension comes in. It's an extension on VS Code, which is a code editor or an IDE for developers, and it will provide the language support that Deb needs for all of her DB2 for ZOS application development. So instead of having to use multiple tools, she can just use the extension, and then because the extension's on VS Code, then she can leverage other tools to also help with other languages like Java, COBOL, or PL1. So if you guys aren't familiar with VS Code, I'd just like to quickly go over that. So as I mentioned, VS Code is a code editor or an IDE. Some of the pros about or what makes it different from other ones is that it's lightweight, and it's also has features that are very good for developers. So it has integration with Git, with the terminal, and also has a lot of languages that it supports. And like other IDE and code editors, VS Code also has a very extensive and active extension support. The extension APIs get updated pretty often, and it's a really active community, so we can count on that. And there are also other extensions on VS Code for Z, such as Z Open Editor or Zoe Explorer. One of my demos will include using one of these extensions with the DB2 developer extension, so we can see how that creates the flow for the application developers. And lastly, VS Code applications or VS Code extensions can also be deployed on other platforms such as Eclipse Theia or Red Hat Code Ready Workspaces. So these types of platforms are starting to shift the developer environment into the cloud. So by building the extension on VS Code, we can get ready for that. Okay, so some other statistics I'd like to share is why do we decide to choose VS Code over other IDEs or code editors? So when we started development in 2020, we took a look at the Stack Overflow developer survey in 2019, and it showed that Visual Studio Code was the most used IDE with 50.70%. And then looking at it today at the survey in 2022, you can see VS Code is still in the lead, but with a much greater percentage at 74.48%. All right, and then let's get into the installation. So to install the extension, it's pretty simple. You first need Visual Studio Code, which is the IDE or code editor. And then once you open it up, there's a few views that you can switch to. And there's specifically the extensions view, where you can search all the extensions available for VS Code and install them. So you need to search IBM Z, and then usually our extensions in one of the top three. Find our extension, the IBM Db2 for ZOS developer extension, and click the install button. And that's it. That's all you need to do to install. As you can see, I only have one slide for that, so it shows how easy it is to install that. So next, getting into the features. So at a high level, again, in general, the features are meant to help DB2 application developers write their applications. So we have features like SQL language support, which would help with the SQL syntax with highlighting and SQL checking, as well as some code completion and signature help for stored procedures and functions, and also the ability to format SQL statements. And of course, once you actually written the SQL, you can use the extension to connect to DB2 and also run those SQL statements against DB2. And then specifically for native stored procedures, we also have the ability to deploy, run, and debug native stored procedures right in VS Code. And then lastly, we also have some tuning features for VS Code, which currently we have the 3 basic free features: Visual Explain, Statistics Advisor, and Capture Query Environment. All right, so I'll be demoing these features, but I just want to go over them quickly and also provide a visual so we can sort of get an idea what it does, and then during the demo, you can actually see how it works. So for syntax highlighting and syntax checking, it's as it reads, it will highlight the SQL syntax, and if the SQL syntax has an error in it, it will check it and also underline it for you. So if you see in a screenshot, you can see all of the SQL syntax and keywords highlighted. And if we were to misspell one of the keywords or have incorrect syntax, then it will be highlighted in underlined in the red squiggly line. And then for code completion and signature help, this currently is only supported for the built-in DB2 functions and the DB2 supplied stored procedures. So like with other languages, as you start typing functions or stored procedures or methods, you'll typically see a list of all of the available ones you can use. So as you start to type, you'll see a list of all the available stored procedures and functions that you can use for DB2. And then when you open the parentheses to start inputting parameters, there's also a signature help, which will show you how many parameters are needed, what type they are, whether they're in, out, or out parameters, and also an explanation of the stored procedure or function. And then there's also formatting SQL. So this is usually a one-click action. If you have some SQL, for example, on the left-hand side that's not very well indented and it's hard to read, you can do a one-click action to format SQL, and then on the right-hand side, that's how it would look like after it's formatted. Okay, and now getting into connection of DB2. So in the extension, you can manage connections. You can add them, delete them, edit them. So in order to add them, you'll need the typical information for a DB2 connection. And we also support 3 different types of authentication methods: the password, RACF pass ticket, and also the MFA token. And if you're interested in adding JDBC properties or enabling the trace, there's also the ability to do that. So once we have a DB2 connection, then you can run some SQL. So the SQL itself typically is in a .SQL file, but they can actually be in any file and you can run from there. So you can, for example, have an application in Java, like in the screenshot on the right. And if you have some embedded SQL, you can highlight the SQL and run it using the extension directly from another file. Okay, and then for native stored procedures, these files have to end with the .sp SQL file. And with that extension, you can deploy, run, and also debug native stored procedures. So on the right-hand side is an example of what it looks like to debug it. But during the demo, I'll also show how to deploy and run them. And then lastly, the tuning features. So as I mentioned, we currently support the 3 free features for Visual Explain, Statistics Advisor, and Capture Query Environment. So the extension provides the ability to directly tune SQL directly from VS Code and then view the results inside VS Code. Also, just want to mention that for the SQL tuning services, there are some prereqs that need to be installed on the DB2 side. So if you're interested in that, there are some few documentations that you can look at. All right, so moving on to the demo. So I'll be demoing the features that I've described. The first 4 demos will be demoing those features. And then lastly, I'll also like to show integration with another extension, Zoe Explorer. So Zoe Explorer allows users to view data sets and also USS files directly in VS Code. So by leveraging that, we can run SQL directly from ZOS by using the Zoe Explorer. Right, so let's get right to the demo. So here I have VS Code open already. There's an Explorer tab, a Search tab, and a few other tabs. But in particular, let's first look at the Extensions tab to see how you can find the extension. So here's the Extensions tab. This is the marketplace. You can think of it like the App Store or the Google Play Store for your phones. So you can search extensions that other developers have created and install them to enhance their VS Code experience. So if I type IBM Z, you can see our IBM developer extensions, the third hit. And then from here, you'll be able to install it. But since I already have it installed, you don't see the button. But if I haven't had the extension installed, you'll see the install button for all of these other extensions. So once you have the extension installed, there's already some features that you can use without even connecting to DB2, and that's the language support. So if I were to click on a SQL file, you can see that the syntax highlighting is already in action. So I didn't even need to connect to DB2 to use the syntax highlighting feature. And also, if I were to misspell any of the keywords, we can also get the syntax checking here. And then you can also hover to see some hints on how to resolve the error. And then for code completion and signature help, if I were to start typing a stored procedure or function, you can see that it would provide a drop-down list with all of the suggested fill-ins. So since I type admin, I can see all of the functions or stored procedures that have admin in its name. Let's click on one of them. And as I start the open parentheses, this is the signature help. So you can see the first parameter is highlighted in blue. So as I'm typing the parameters, you can see that the highlighted gets moved on to the next parameter. So you can easily figure out which parameter you're on and also what type it is. Okay, so there's that. And then for format SQL, I mentioned it was one click, but it's actually 2 clicks. You first need to right click the document, and then there's a format document action, and clicking that would format the SQL here. So to show an even more extreme example, let's say all of these were on one line, and if I were to format the SQL, then it looks much better and readable. Okay, so there you go. So those were all of the features that you can use out of the box. You don't need to connect to any DB2 to utilize the SQL language support. So now if I wanted to connect to DB2 and perform some queries against DB2 or some execute some SQL statements, then we'll need to define a DB2 connection. So to do that, when we have the extension installed, there's a new icon created just for our extension, the DB2 developer extension. So clicking that changes your sidebar view into what panels we need for our extension. So we have the connections view, which allows the users to manage their DB2 connection as well as tuning servers. And there's also a query history view to keep track of all the query you ran, and also you can revisit to review the result sets again or review any of the execution status. And lastly, there's a tuning history. Just like with query history, we'll save all of the tunings that you have done against the SQLs. So for DB2 connections, let's expand this. I already have one connection created, but let's say if you wanted to add more connections, you can click this plus button here and then input the necessary information to create that DB2 connection. And there's also tracing as well if you want to enable the JDBC trace. And then under the optional tabs, this is where you can define the JDBC properties. And the tuning tab, I'll go over later when we get into tuning SQL. So with this connection, I'll go ahead and use it. First, I will connect to the connection. So let's right click connect. Okay, so now I'm connected to the connection. So if I wanted to run the SQL against my connection, I'll first need to go to the status bar down here in the blue. Currently, it's already assigned to my connection, but if it wasn't assigned, I can switch it to whichever connection I want to run the SQL against. Currently, it's my connection. So if running SQL, you could either highlight specific SQLs to run, or you can also choose to run all. So let's go ahead and do just a selection first, selected. Okay, so I've ran the SQL statement against the my connection. So you can see that it returned the result set in a paginated format table. And then there's also a status tab where you can see what statement was actually ran and also what was the return code and also elapsed time. Okay, and then running SQL, if there's also a parameter marker like this question mark here, then you'll be prompted to input an input value before running the SQL. So here, let's do D11 run. So now the SQL ran with the D11 parameter, and we get that information here. If you go to the parameters tab, you can see what was the input that you used for this SQL. And again, there's the status tab like with the other SQL. Okay, let me change this to a constant. And then for run all, let's do that. So run all, instead of getting the result sets initially, you'll see a summary page. Since there are multiple SQLs ran, it will show you how many SQLs succeeded, failed, or had a warning, and also the total elapsed time for running all the SQLs. And then on the left-hand side, you'll see instead of having one entry for each, they're now grouped under one entry, but then there's a separate entry under that for each of these SQL statements. So clicking through each of these, you'll see the result set for each of these queries. All right. And also just want to show the embedded SQL run. So here I have a Java application with some embedded SQL. So if I run it to run the SQL, I can simply just start to highlight whatever I need. And then right click. Yeah, there's a bunch more options here because this is a Java file and Java files have more options here, but we'll still have the DB2 extension options like run SQL here. Yep, so here we can run SQL embedded in other application languages. All right, so let's say we had these SQLs, but we also want to tune the SQLs. So if we're interested in tuning a specific SQL, there's also the ability to tune SQL. But before we can do that, as I mentioned, there's some prereqs that will need to be installed on the DB2 side. So this includes the SQL tuning services, which you will need to define the tuning server where you can use the tuning services. So just like with a DB2 connection, you can also add tuning servers here. But the information is a lot less. All you need is the host and port of the tuning server as well as the authentication to access that server. So once you have a tuning server defined, like I have here, you can see the tuning profiles. So tuning profiles will allow you to create different connections to different DB2s. So I already have a profile here called profile 1 that I'll use for the demo. So I just wanted to show this part. All right. And then going back to that tuning tab I was talking about. So under the tuning tab, once I had that profile created, then I can assign that profile to this connection. And this will allow me to tune SQL through this my connection. So I already have that defined here, so I'll go ahead and do that. So just like with running SQL, you'll just right click, and instead of doing run SQL, you can do tune selected SQL. So let's go ahead and do that. And now on the right-hand side, we have a list of actions that you can use, and you can choose which tuning action you want to perform against that SQL. So I'll go ahead and do all of them. Right, so we'll see a summary page for all of the tuning actions. And you can see that the status here will be updated in real time as we keep checking to see if the job has finished. So all of the jobs has finished are all marked as success, and you also get notifications down here about that. So to actually view the tuning results, you'll see that an entry under tuning history was created. If I open that up, you can click on each of these to get the results. So first for Visual Explain. Sometimes takes some time to load. So this would open a graphical view of the access path. Okay, sometimes it's a bit slow here. In case that doesn't work, there's also the ability to view it in the external browser. So you can click this globe icon here, and this will open the results in your browser view. Yep, so here's the Visual Explain. If you're familiar with Visual Explain, you can do those typical actions like clicking on each node and viewing properties, predicates, or any other information needed here. Right, and there's also Statistics Advisor. So Stats Advisor would show any recommended run stats commands to improve the statistics, but since MySQL did not have any, it currently says none. And also, if you enable the option to run the run stats command, you'll see the execution results here. Okay, so to actually enable that, let me quickly show that. There's a SQL tuning options over here. So for that specific run stats, if you wanted to run those run stats commands, then this is where you would say yes for that. Yeah, and since we're on this page, there's also a bunch of other DB2 registers you can set, and also other properties like the schema that you want to use, or the authorization ID you want to use to perform explain, and others like that. Okay, and lastly, there's a capture query environment. So capturing query environment would capture your query's environment and store that information into a zip file. So this is useful if you want to contact IBM support and help them troubleshoot your query environment. So you get a notification down here on where it was saved. And you can see the zip file right here. Okay, so the last thing I want to show with the extension by itself is the native stored procedure support. So again, as I mentioned, you'll need to have that .sp SQL file for working with native stored procedures. And then within this file, you need to have the create procedure or the create or replace DDL to perform the native stored procedure actions. So with the .sp SQL file, if you were to right click, you can see there are new options for stored procedures: deploying, debugging, and running them. So first, let's deploy the stored procedure. So for deploying, if you wanted to deploy against a different connection, you can just specify that here. You can also change the target schema and also the build owner for the native stored procedures, as well as changing how to handle duplicates. So if this stored procedure already existed on the DB2 system, choosing the alter duplicates would issue an alter procedure statement. Drop would drop the procedure and then create the procedure again. And then treating the duplicate deployments as errors would just not send any SQL and just issue a warning saying the stored procedure is already created. Okay, I'll go ahead and choose alter. And then under routine options, there's also some other options you can specify. Since I would like to show the debugging as well, I would enable debugging and specify WLM environment and deploy. Okay, so you can see that the SQL statement was issued. Because I said to alter duplicates, you can see the alter procedure is used. And also just a side-by-side comparison. So because I also chosen to enable debugging and specified a WLM environment, the allow debug and WLM environment parameters are added here as well. So you can see that that's not in the original SQL, but because I specified that in the deploy and routine options, then they're added in the alter procedure statement here. and this one completed with return code 0. And then in case you were to accidentally close the SQL result sets and you wanted to review the SQL execution, all of the history is also saved here, so you can revisit that. Okay, so let's go ahead and do the next action, debugging. So for debugging, you'll need to input any values for any in or in-out parameters. So since I have one in parameter department number, I'll need to input a value for that before I debug. Let's go ahead and debug. Okay, so now we're in the debug mode. So in here, we're currently on the first line, and then you can choose to set breakpoints on the left-hand side. So you can see these red dots. I can click and add as many as I want. And then with breakpoints added, you can choose to how to step through your stored procedure. So you can do continue, which would go to the first breakpoint, or you can also go step by step into the stored procedure and go through each line. And you can also choose to restart or stop. And in case VS Code did not switch to the proper view, there's also a run and debug view. So clicking that will show you information about your current debug session. So let me go ahead and set a breakpoint in this while loop so we can see it get hit multiple times. Hit continue. So here we've hit the breakpoint for the first time, and you can see that the variables have been initialized with their values. And if I hit continue again, you can see the values getting updated. You can see that any values that were updated also have a little highlight on them, so you know which ones were updated. Click it again, and you can see the values getting incremented. Keep going. So let me remove the breakpoint, hit continue, and let it finish. All right, so the debugging has finished. Going to the parameters, you can see what was the actual, since debugging is actually running the procedure, you'll be able to see the out values that were collected. All right. And then also under our extension view, just like with deploying the stored procedure, running or debugging the stored procedure will also create new entries here for you to revisit. Okay, so lastly, running stored procedure. Just like with debugging, you'll also need to specify an input value, and running that would basically just run the stored procedure with your input values. Going under parameters, we can also verify that the value was the same as we did when we were debugging. All right. So that is all of the extension demos. Just one last demo I'd like to show is using our extension with Zoe Explorer. So Zoe Explorer, just like with our extension, you need to go to the extensions view, type in Zoe, and install the Zoe Explorer extension. So I already have Zoe Explorer installed, so you don't see that button. So quick overview of what Zoe Explorer will do is there's quite a bit of features with the Zoe project itself, but the Zoe Explorer extension specifically for VS Code allows you to view, modify, and kind of interact with the mainframe's data sets, USS files, and you can also even run jobs directly in VS Code if you like. But for this demo, I'll just be taking advantage of being able to view data sets from ZOS. So when you have Zoe Explorer installed, Zoe Explorer also has its own icon on the left-hand side. So just like how the extension has an icon for our views, Zoe Explorer also has its own. So let's go ahead and click that. So under Zoe Explorer, they have the datasets view, the USS files view, and also the jobs view for each of their 3 features. So I already created a connection under datasets so that I can see all of the datasets under that same My Connection. So here we can see the PDS and also any sequential datasets under My Connection. I actually have a filter on it for dev extension, so I only see this much. But if you like to see other PDS, then you can create a filter and view the data sets just under there. Okay, so with, click that. So here I have some JCL. So here's an example of JCL with some SQL in it using the DSN type 2 to run the SQL. And just like with other languages like Java, how I can run SQL directly in there, I can also simply just highlight the SQL, right click, and also run it. Here. And then this would create another entry under our extension, query history, and you can revisit that. And also if you had just plain SQL here, you can also just run that SQL as well. Yep, so with Explorer and the developer extension, you can run SQL directly from ZOS. So without having to open the TN20, the green screen basically, without having to do that, you can just do all of that directly within VS Code, view data sets, run SQL. All right, so that's all for my demos. Just a few more slides to go over. So for what's next in our plan, so we've been developing all of these developer extension features since 2020, with our latest in May having day one support for DB2 version 13, as well as some usability enhancements. And then next year in the first quarter, we plan to release the advanced tuning features. So these would be the paid features like the Access Path Advisor or Index Advisor and others like that. And we also plan to have initial support for catalog navigation, which is one of the highly anticipated features to sort of browse and navigate through the DB2 objects in the catalog. And we'll also include some more usability enhancements based on some of our user feedback. So just a quick sneak peek on some of those advanced tuning features. This is an example of what Index Advisor would look like. So this would go through the same flow as our other tuning features like Visual Explain, Stats Advisor. You would just select some SQL, tune it, and then check the box for Index Advisor, and you'll be able to view the results directly in VS Code. So with Index Advisor, you can see what are the suggested indexes to create, drop, or alter, as well as seeing the existing indexes that are related to the SQL that you wanted to tune. And another sneak peek, this is for Access Path Advisor. So this would show you any recommendations to improve your access path. Right, and here I also have a resources page. I'll work with Martin so I can share this with the audience and have it available in the public so that you can view the links for all of the topics that I've discussed today. And also, I'd like to give a quick shout out to our documentation. This is one of the best documentations that I've seen. So for the extension for all of those features that I've demoed, there's information about that for each of these here, as well as many other more kind of power user features if you're interested. It's also very well documented with kind of quick, short articles, so it's easy to consume. And also, there's also animated GIFs and screenshots, so it's easy to get a visual of them as well. Just some examples. Right. And then for our extension, the ability to report any issues or give suggestions is very open and easy to do. So to do that, they're all under, oops, hold on, I lost my mouse. Here it is. Quickly get out of this. So to report any issues or give any suggestions for the developer extension, we have a public GitHub where you can open issues against. Let me go ahead and copy that. Yep, so on our public GitHub, IBM/DB2 for ZOS developer extension-about, this is the issues page where you can open new enhancements. So you can see other users already opening enhancements, as well as reporting bugs. Right. And then also for VS Code itself, or SQL tuning services, or the other VS Code extensions, we also have links here for that. Okay, and that's all for my presentation. So Martin, if there's any questions or anything you see, feel free to let me know.
Yeah, I have a question here. Just a sec. Does Visual Studio support the definition and execution of DB2 REST services?
Currently it does not, but if that's something that customers are interested in, feel free to open issues on GitHub and thumbs it up, and we can give it priority.
Good. That's a pretty exciting presentation today. Lots of good stuff in there. Let me take back control here and just do our final polling question, which is always interesting to see. And let me get rid of that and move on here. And our last poll question is probably the most important, which is this famous question: did you learn anything today? And as expected, 100% of our audience learned something. Yay. We love that.
Yeah, great.
That's what we like to see at the DB2Night show, that we're providing value and people are learning things from what we present. So that's the good news. And with that, I'd like to thank you very much. And as you've mentioned in your presentation, I look forward to coordinating with you to get other resources out to our audience that will help them. We also find that depending on how many people attend, we also have, we're getting up around 3 million downloads of past shows. So if people can't make it at this time, you'll find that people will download the show and learn more things later. So it's all good news. And so with that, I'm going to, I think we're on the last page there. Yes, we are. That's my Chihuahua trick joke. The Chihuahuas are notoriously untrainable or hard to train. But that's my life away from DB2. But here's the music. I'll thank you once again for a great show, Catherine. Thanks for being with us. Thanks for providing this information to the DB2 community. We'll see you in a couple of more weeks. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone in the United States. Hope everything goes well with you and your family. And we'll see you in December for the next DB2Night shows. Thanks to all. Thanks again. See you next time. Bye-bye.